And welcome to World Insight with Tian Wei coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, Iraq's Prime Minister declares victory over the Islamic State in Mosul. How can Iraq ensure that this military victory is not eclipsed by a low-level insurgency from IS? Later in our program, I sit down with Chinese-American film director Dayyan Eng as we talk about his new film, Wished. We also discuss how Chinese films can challenge Hollywood and the Chinese movie market. And we start today's program in Iraq, where its government has declared victory over the Islamic State in Mosul, 3 years after the militant group took control of the country's second-largest city. Meanwhile, the confirmation of the death of ISIL leader gives another boost to global counter-terrorism efforts. However, the Iraqi government now faces the huge challenges of rebuilding the city and mediating disputes among its many ethnicities and parties. For more on this, take a look at this.
It was an announcement the city had been waiting for. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi declaring the official liberation of Mosul from ISIL. ISIL had been holding out in a tiny neighborhood of Mosul's old city. The Prime Minister's message was clear. While a few ISIL fighters may remain in the city, the war is over. After 3 years, Iraq's second largest city is free.
Our victory today is a victory over dishonesty, brutality, and terrorism. And I announce from here to the entire world the end, failure, and collapse of the mythical and terrorist Islamic State group.
The United Nations estimates that Mosul needs a year and $1 billion in investment just to restore basic services. Long-term rebuilding projects will cost billions more. The war displaced about 900,000 people. Tens of thousands still live in tent cities outside of Mosul. For them, returning to normal life seems to be in reach despite the horrors they once faced.
God willing, we'll be happy and we'll return to our houses. We'll return to a comfortable life. We'll be released from this oppression.
God willing, we will return and everything will be like before. Everyone will be back at their place, all as brothers, with no difference between Christians, Muslims, Yazidis, Arabs or Kurds, Sunni or Shiite. All will return as brothers.
Citizens are hoping for the future, seeing a Mosul that can recover. And the confirmation of the death of ISIL's group leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, is inspiring. However, the devastation is staggering. The threat of the Islamic State remains, and Iraq is still divided. Tens of thousands of men and women are waiting to see if the Iraqi government can tackle these challenges.
So what is next for the campaign against ISIL after Mosul? Let's ask our panel. Joining us here in Beijing, Yan Shuai, who is an analyst at the Anti-Terrorism Center at the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. Sir, welcome to our program. In Baghdad, Iraq, we have invited Saad al-Mutalibi, who is a member of the official Baghdad Security Council that deals with issues of counterterrorism and also a former political advisor to the Iraqi government. Welcome, sir. And in Washington, D.C., the U.S., we are joined by Jonah Blank, who is a senior political scientist from RAND Cooperation. Welcome as well. I want to start with you, Mutalibi. In Iraq, we understand just hours ago, the Iraqi forces strike once again some of the strongholds of IS in Mosul. Help us to understand what exactly is the latest situation.
Yes, thank you very much. The environment is quite difficult. Mosul, Nino, is a very large city. It's the second largest city in Iraq, and it had 3 million inhabitants. So it is not a modest city. It's quite large with a horizontal expansion of houses. We don't have high rises. The houses in Iraq is on a horizontal build-up. So the city is very large, divided into two major sections. The east side and the west side. The river Tigris goes in between. So it is very large. All the city has been, I mean, the center of the city on both sides, east and west, have been liberated. But being a large city on the outskirts, the ISIS still has certain areas that under the control.
Right.
So it is only natural that we still have some resistance. Of course, this is the victory is a battle victory. We didn't win the war yet. We need to completely wipe out ISIL so that we could say that we completely eradicated Iraq from ISIL fighters. Then the second problem comes up with the second problem, which is the major problem really, is how to clear the people's thoughts, how to get rid of the extremism, thoughts that inhabited Mosul even before the entering of ISIS to Mosul.
We are going
to
over 6 talk
years,
about some of those points.
Mr.
Al-Mutalibi, we go to the other guest before you talk about specific on that. But even about the so-called the winning of the battle, Mr. Blank, now is quite vague, isn't it? I mean, we have heard about victories from time to time, but none of them was sustainable earlier. So how confident do you think this time it is, despite of the fact that we are still hearing sporadic battles going on right before our show just a few hours ago?
Yes. Well, the victory in Mosul is real. That is verified because we can actually see where ISIS fighters are, what territory they hold, and where they don't. The real question is what happens next. We've seen this before. Areas get cleared, but then they don't get held. And this is where the Iraqi government really has to step up and show that it is the government for all of its people, for the Sunni as well as for the Shia, and not allow what has happened in the past, which is non-governmental forces, Shia militias, to attack these Sunni inhabitants and give way to resentments that bring ISIS back in.
Things that are very complicated at this point, how to maintain the so-called winning battles. Mr. Al-Mutalibi, as you earlier rightly put, is already challenging enough. Who do you think should be playing that role, as being questioned by Mr. Blanc earlier? Should that be the newly trained police force inside Iraq, or should that be the military try to hold on to all the key positions inside the city? That's going to put a lot of pressure on the military itself. Mr. Al-Mutalibi?
Is that question
Yes,
for me?
that is for you, sir.
Yes, yes. Yes, sorry, yes. Yes, it has to be both sides. We have to have a major humanitarian efforts. We have to have a major cleaning of ideas and thoughts, at the same time as providing actual services and justice to the people. It's not good just to go with guns and blazing fire. That will not resolve the issue. That will create more enemies. ISIS are finished. The people who were supporting ISIS, basically they will be eradicated gradually from the picture. So now a very hard job for the government is to be able to make the inhabitants of Mosul, as we succeeded in Salahuddin, as we succeeded in Ramadi in Anbar province, where we won the hearts of the people and the minds of the people. The same experience must be again conducted in Mosul. Of course, Mosul is more difficult, but nevertheless, the same action must be taken to show the people of the inhabitants there of justice and help, and providing them with all the necessary services that they require.
Since sir, you mentioned about the word justice, there are a lot of cases going on in which there are resentment against what exactly happened. Capturing Mosul was a tall order, as some say. 1.3 million civilians lived in Mosul, as you mentioned earlier, along with estimated 5,000 ISIL fighters in Iraq's second biggest city. Since start of the offensive, the Iraqi government reported nearly 900,000 civilians have been internally displaced in an area controlled by three forces: the Iraqi government, the ISIL, and the Kurds. And now to mention the casualties among the civilians that have been reported by some non-governmental organizations like Amnesty International, for example. So that certainly, Mr. El-Boutalbidi, it likely to create a big resentment among the civilians about what happened and who is going to be in control of the city. Your thoughts, sir?
Yes, it's very important to understand that many of these reports were exaggerated. We are in direct contact.
We have some problems connecting to Iraq right now, but let me go to Mr. Blank in Washington, D.C. What do you make of those challenging issues, casualties of the civilians? Some say it is unavoidable, but the numbers seem to be quite high. There's likely to be big resentment against that among the civilians.
You're very right. And there is an enormous challenge in rebuilding Mosul and rebuilding the trust of the people who lived in Mosul, who live in the future in Mosul, and of all Iraqis, of all communities. This is primarily a challenge for the government of Iraq, but the outside world does have a part to play. How much willingness there will be is a big question, given the scope of the challenge and the uncertainty about the approach of the government of Iraq.
Having said all of that, Mr. Yan, what do you think as an observer from the outside? I mean, the war in Iraq, at the very beginning when it was fought, it was not necessarily winning the hearts and minds of the international community. Then after so-called the declaration of the war's winning by the U.S. side, things are getting ever more complicated, and that war continued until today. Now we are hearing from the Iraqi government saying certain battles are being won, but not the war itself either. So what do you make of this prolonged period and the current frustrations likely to challenge the area?
Yeah, if you see from the long perspective, the fight against the Islamic State, the liberation of Mosul city is only the first stage of the war against the Islamic State, and this compared to the latter stages, maybe it is more easier. If after the liberation of Mosul, a lot of more works needs to be done, and it's maybe a bigger challenge lies ahead. From the security perspective, the Iraqi government and the international community needs to take necessary measures to bring the sense of stability and security for the civilians living in Mosul, and bring them back to Mosul city. And economically, the Mosul city almost completely destroyed by ISIL militants, and so the Mosul city and the surrounding areas needs to be reconstructed, and this may take years to fulfill this task.
But the question is, who will foot the bill?
Yes.
First of all, and secondly, when you talk about keeping the peace, will the Iraqi army be able to do that? If others are coming in, under what kinds of umbrella? That seems to be extremely important, Mr. Yan.
Yes, the reconstruction efforts. Currently, it seems that both the Iraqi government and the international community don't have any post-Mosul plan, because it has been estimated that it may needs $100 billion to reconstruct the areas previously controlled by Islamic State, and also due to the fight against the Islamic State. In this process, the Shia militia groups become stronger and stronger. And this is one of the major concerns for the Sunni populations. So the Iraqi government needs to prevent the Shia militants to have their hands on the Mosul city, and the Iraqi government need to deploy the government forces in the Mosul city.
Complicated enough even when it comes to solutions. But Mr. Blank, I do want to come back to you, because it has always been debated from day one as to what so-called outside forces, what role they should play and could play during this process. In the United States, Mr. Blank, you know better than I do, with the change of administration, there have been a big attitude change about whether more participation or not in what is going on in Iraq from the U.S. perspective. So given all of these factors, what will the outside parties do, and how will they do it, Mr. Blank?
Yes, that is a very big question, and I don't think anyone knows the answer. The new administration in Washington does not appear to have a different strategy than the Obama administration when it comes to Iraq. There has been a lot of talk about new strategies, but we haven't really seen anything different on the ground. The big challenge, really, I agree with your guest in Beijing, the big challenge is going to be for the Iraqi government, because unless the Iraqi government can prove itself to be an honest player protecting the lives of Sunni as well as Shia and keeping the Shia militia groups under control, then we're just going to see space opened up for ISIS to come back. And I think in that event, it doesn't matter how much foreign assistance, whether security or money, is provided, as long as the Iraqi government is not perceived as being the supporter of its Sunni population.
I see. Therefore, I have to go to Mr. Al-Butalibi. What about that, sir? Because in Iraq and outside Iraq, there are a lot of chaotic things going on as well, involving regional parties who might want to have a role or two on what is going on inside your country between Sunni and Shia. And as a result, can the Iraqi government, the central government of Iraq, be strong enough to direct the militaries and hold on to what has already been accomplished so far?
First of all, I'm quite surprised to see that many think tanks in the free world misplacing the Iraqi Shia with the problem between the Americans and the Iranians, and calling the Shia of Iraq militias, where in fact the armed forces of Iraq is made of all this Iraqi rainbow. We have Sunni, Shia, Kurds, everybody within Iraq is part of the armed forces. So there are no Shiite militias. We have public mobilization units who are Christians, Yazidi, Sunni, tribesmen Sunni, and some Shias. So the PMUs, the Public Mobilization Unit, which you very surprisingly have been called Shia militias, have nothing to do with entering Mosul. They stayed out in the outskirts. They never entered any built-up areas in Mosul. They are in charge of protecting the border between Iraq and Syria. And they are, as I said, Sunnis and the Kurds and Yazidis and Christians. So at any cost, you know, this is very important to understand that many in the world think that Iraqi Shia are Iranians, and that is not the case, just to make sure that people understand that. The problem in Iraq is major, but it's within the world's interest is Iraq does not return into a state of terrorism. Because if Iraq becomes a failed state and an incubator for terrorism, the whole of the Middle East will be infected by this virus. So it's in the interest of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Jordan, and everybody in the Middle East, and even Turkey, is to stand by Iraq, to help us in rebuilding Iraq, maybe foot part of the bill for helping Iraq, or at least stop the propaganda against Iraq, which is fueling the supporters of ISIS. Now that again goes to the international community. We understand that the Americans have an ambiguous plan with Iraq. They are not very clear. Neither Obama was clear. Now Mr. Trump is also not very clear on his stand on Iraq. And how will he assist Iraq? We do have resources, but our resources are in the underground. We have oil in the ground, not for sale. So maybe part of the package will be to invite nations to help us in excavating the oil and maybe marketing the oil, and provide us with the services and the engineering skills that are required to rebuild and reconstruct these areas.
I need to have our American guest, Mr. Blanc, to respond to that, and then followed by the Chinese guest. Mr. Blanc, first of all, you need to respond to your Iraqi colleague. Secondly, we all know that even in the neighborhoods of Iraq, the division we are seeing in some of the Gulf countries between Qatar and Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. Secretary Tillerson is now in the region trying to mediate, very unlikely to achieve anything big. So given the circumstances, will those countries, as Mr. al-Mutalibi wished, be able to contribute to the stability?
Well, thank you. I think Mr. Mutalibi is absolutely right when he says that the external world has interfered far too much in Iraq. That definitely includes the United States, which bears a very high degree of responsibility. It also includes Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all of the neighbors. It includes Iran as well. And it includes all of the states that have interfered throughout history, particularly the last few years. We do have to be honest, though. There are Shia militias, there are Sunni militias. These militias have operated outside of the control of the Iraqi government in the past. And if that happens in the future, it will be very difficult for the outside world to play a constructive role.
Well, Mr. Yan, you certainly heard the differences of opinions regarding what exactly is going on inside Iraq between our two other panelists. What is your view here? And meanwhile, so-called the international community under what umbrella to do what for Iraq now?
Yeah, it is the common interest for the international community. But there is one big question need to be answered, and I'm quite worried about the future trend of the combat against the Islamic State, because in the first stage of the combat against the Islamic State, the different parties, including the Middle Eastern countries, Russia, Iran, and the United States, and the Europe countries, they all have the common enemy, the Islamic State. But after the first stage of victory against ISIL, there are vacuums left in Iraq and also in Syria. So it seems that these different parties are losing their common enemies. And especially for the Middle Eastern countries, actually their priorities is not to fight Islamic State. Their priorities is to compete for the dominance with Iran, with Russia. So I think more challenges lies ahead for the Middle Eastern countries and also for the international community. How the fight against the Islamic State will evolve in the future.
Big question over there. The Iraq issue has been hanging over there for more than a decade as a result of that war, and things are not settled at all, given what a dramatically changing region and world we're having right now. But I want to thank the three of you gentlemen for being with us. Saad al-Mutalibi, Jonah Blanc, Yan Shuai, really appreciate it. Thank you, gentlemen. You're watching World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing. Still to come on our program. I sit down with Chinese-American film director Dayyan Eng. We discuss the Chinese movie market and how Chinese movies can better compete with Hollywood, particularly for the Chinese young people. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you live Monday to Friday on CGTN. The Chinese movie market, second only to the United States, has an enormous amount of capital rushing in recently. This demand has churned out many movies, yet few have managed to satisfy the rising standards of Chinese audience. They want films to be entertaining, but also thought-provoking. Dayyan Eng is a film director who has worked in China for about 20 years. He broke into the scene with some award-winning short films. But his ambition is to produce movies that the Chinese youth will enjoy. But has he accomplished that? How has he, as a movie director and someone living in China for that long, adapted to the rapidly changing society? How can he shed light onto this process? Before my talk with him, take a look at this first.
Growth, growth, growth. In the past couple of years, the Chinese movie market is all about expanding at an astonishing pace. Hollywood blockbusters make up at least half of its box office. The other half are for domestic filmmakers to capitalize on. Dayyan Eng, a Chinese-American filmmaker who grew up with two cultures, is among the biggest names to Chinese movie fans. His early work, Bus 44, was the first Chinese short film to win an award at the Venice Film Festival and the Sundance Film Festival in 2001. In 2005, Eng wrote and directed Chinese independent feature film Waiting Alone, which became a hit after its release in China and was called by media as one of the best films that year. His 2012 movie, Inseparable, was awarded the Best Co-Production Movie at the Chinese-American Film Festival. His latest work is a fantasy comedy called Wished, currently screening in Chinese cinemas. Set in a metropolis, the tale follows a salesman who surprisingly discovered that 19 wishes, from never needing to shower to becoming a billionaire, all come true thanks to an unlikely Chinese deity.
Is it easy to be entertaining?
I think to a certain level, you can't please everybody. I mean, even if it's with artistic, I guess, so-called art films, you make it, there's still a lot of people like, what the heck was that? They don't like it. You make your entertaining movies, there's some who like, some who don't. It's always going to be the case.
Two choices. One is to be really with the professionals, do a movie that could be commercially somewhat successful. The other is really do a movie you're extremely satisfied with and you think it's going to be there for some years.
I've been fortunate enough to have already done that. With Waiting Alone to this day, it's been 12 years since that movie came out. It's listed always on the top, the top 10, top 5 lists of best romantic comedies. I don't think I'm done with it, but I think I've already done that, so I'm not going to try to duplicate that again.
But doing entertaining movies, very competitive.
Me, yes, of course. But for me, Waiting Alone was an entertaining movie. I think the thing is, it came at a time when no one else was doing that, which is why it stood out. Everybody was like, oh my God, they didn't know movies can be made that way.
But this time it's different because your movie now is trying to be entertaining, so-called humorous. There's an enormous amount of competition in the market.
Yeah, exactly.
There were earlier successful examples as well.
Exactly. But I think what we're doing differently in this is still, it's a very different film. Yes, sure, we want box office. We want, I want to be, making the investors money and whatnot. And this time, actually, it's been the most of any movies I've ever done. But it doesn't mean that I'm, I guess, to take some people's quote, I'm not selling out per se, because if I was going to do that, I'd just go find the hottest star, I'd go find some book that everybody's read, and I'd just do that, as they call qian qian, which means you're just getting the money and using the easiest way to go make it. That, which a lot of other movies are being done that way in the market here, is the fastest way, but I'm not doing that. I could have done it that way, but I still think we need to be doing original movies.
What is movie like for you? Is it a tool, or is it a product, or is it something that you can correlate with just to understand better about what is going on around you?
For me, it is a combination. It's a commercial film, yes. This movie's point is to entertain and make money. So entertain audiences, make the financiers money. That's the purpose of it. And for me, I've thrown a little bit of what I'm trying to express into it. So I'm able to have a little bit of artistic expression. It's also a product, and yet hopefully audiences can see it and be entertained.
You are a very special reference for all of us, if I could use as a sample, to understand about the Chinese movie industry and also about the growing Chinese population when it comes to youth, because you came to China's mainland in your early 20s.
Yeah.
You attended one of those film academies well known in this country, directly from the United States.
Yeah.
The China then, you have noticed, of course, very different from China now. I just wonder, in retrospect, how do you as a filmmaker grow together with the dramatic changes of real China?
I think it's definitely changed a lot, and in some ways, I think as we always get older, you always miss things in the past. I always like to reminisce a bit, yeah. But for me, and that's also why even with this film, we were stressing, and I've been stressing that I'm not. Yeah, look, I also like to be nostalgic a little bit, and we have some nostalgia in this film. But in some ways, I'm not using that as a selling point, because for me, it's about moving on. You got to always move on, and that's how you can continue. And that's why for the reviews or the critics that did like the movie, they felt that they were surprised that I was able to still get what people 12 years later thought's funny, or what audiences can relate to. And that to me is a very encouraging acknowledgement. Because I think the point is to be able to move on. If you're always looking in the past, you're going to be stuck in the past.
Do you like yourself better as a movie maker or less? Let's just say, compared to 15 years ago.
For me, it's always about sort of being able to get better. Now the movies I make now or in the future, maybe some people will say, yeah, I didn't like that. I like the other one, but that's fine. Everyone has, there's always filmmakers that I also admire, and sometimes yeah, I like their earlier works, I don't like their later works. Sure. But it doesn't mean you discount the changes that have happened in their own works. It just means it's basically what I like to say. Some people they're maybe expecting a dumpling, but I just made them a hamburger. So how are you gonna? You can't compare it. For me, sometimes, and especially in this industry here in China, it's still in its growing process. It's not like in Hollywood where as soon as you see this kind of a poster or this kind of a movie, you know what you're gonna exactly get. Whereas here, it's not there yet.
To you, a filmmaker, what does it mean, the competition in the market?
It's very tough, I think, especially now, because 2 years ago there was a lot of, it was very strange, it was a little off, actually. Now everyone sees from this point on, they can tell. A couple of years ago when all kinds of movies are making like 2 billion, 3 billion at the box, which was not normal, because what was happening was a lot of tickets were being subsidized, they were being bought by financiers, they were being subsidized by ticketing companies. That all stopped, and as soon as it stopped, as we can see this year, suddenly everything, the grosses go down. It's not that...
But we don't need fake numbers.
Exactly, that's the difference. So, but at the same time, some people will compare, like, wait a second, how come that movie made like 300 million, and how come yours is... As far as the amount of people seeing it, it's actually about the same.
What is the nature of this competition?
It's just, because there's a lot of people making movies, and now because the market's gotten better here, a lot of people think that, oh, hey, I'll make, make some people money, but the majority of movies lose money. That's just a fact.
It is. So. There are complaints, both, I guess, from the audience and also from even the film authorities about the qualities of movies, Chinese movies these days. I mean, generally speaking. Yeah. How would you respond to those comments?
No, I agree. There are a lot of movies that need to be doing better. Local films. I think the main problem is they're not paying attention to the detail or the quality.
Why people rush to do movies?
Because
it's just easy to cash in?
I think they want to, it's just for cashing in, So it's like, all right, quick, let's do it now. Or, oh, this book is really popular now. Quickly, let's get into production. Because you don't want to take too long.
Do you think that's going to change?
I think slowly it will have to change.
Slowly,
because audiences
give me a timeline if you think about it.
Well, I think it's already starting to show. Because 2 years ago, you had these big movies where you see the poster and it's like the biggest stars of China all on it, the poster. They're barely in it. People see it. It's like the worst visual effects ever. And it's a terrible story, and it was done really bad, and everybody hated it. And then those movies in the past, maybe audiences would go and see, but now they're feeling like, wait a sec, are you going to trick me again? They don't trust it, and when they don't trust it, the local film industry suffers, because when they're thinking, wait, I'm going to pay this same amount for a ticket, and then there's Spider-Man, which I know is going to be pretty good probably, so I'm going to go watch that. That's what I do, and audiences are also doing that. So it needs to, as a whole, the Chinese film industry, as long as we're doing our best to make quality films, I think that's the only way you can bring up the audience's expectation, and for them to sort of understand that, hey, not all movies are garbage.
Right.
Okay. But again, like everywhere in the world, you have that problem. In Hollywood, everyone's complaining about the same thing. Why is everything a sequel, remake, superhero? Yeah, that's also the problem.
We're
but that's
frustrated as audience as well.
Exactly. As audiences are tired of seeing the same old things, and so this
That's
is
a different layer of qualities that we're talking about.
Exactly. See, over there, it's not a problem of, oh, why does it look so bad, or why is the cinematography, you know, it's not that problem, it's other issues. But here, yes, sometimes it's the general sort of, why is this guy in the movie? It's like, he can't act, but he's so popular, but they use him anyway. You know, this kind of that's for the fast bucks, because those movies don't last.
What is the relationship between China and Hollywood now, do you think?
Look, in Hollywood, they all know there's a lot of money in China, so they want to sort of court that money for their own productions. We see it in a lot of, big budget Hollywood films, where these Chinese companies keep popping up on the logos. But
and one or two Chinese stars popping up for 5 seconds,
exactly,
speaking hello, and then disappear.
Exactly, which annoys everybody there and here. So I don't know why that keeps happening. But I think the situation is, if you're going to be wanting just the money, then you're going to have to also take the risks that go with it. You know.
What do you mean?
I mean, if you just want to take the money, and there are companies who are maybe not from the film industry, but they have a lot of money, some coal mining company decides they want to do movies, they're going to have some unprofessional sort of situations occur, which
it comes in a package.
It comes with the package. You can't want both. You can't have your cake and eat it too. It's not going to happen, you know. So, you know, and sometimes also in Hollywood, they only sort of recognize the same 5 people that they've heard of, and then they just want to keep getting those guys to do things, and maybe they don't want to do that kind of a thing. So there really is, you know, have to consider the whole package.
Right.
And I've actually, you know, being here over 20 years, and I even, you know, on the previous film, also had that sort of a situation where it's kind of like, okay, these guys are saying they have the money, they've never done movie financing before. Okay, we'll take a chance, and that chance was not very good.
Money is not everything to you.
No, it's not. It never has been. It really, for me, as long as I have a comfortable, you know, I think I'm okay, but it's not my end goal. My end goal isn't to go and make as much money as possible. You know, like if you're a businessman, maybe that's your end goal. For me, it's not.
What is your end goal?
My end goal is to try and make good movies that people like. It's as simple as that. Sounds very naive and strange, but that's it.
What made you happy at the very beginning of your movie career? What made you happy now? You know, 20 years after that, you asked that fundamental question in your movie, which is a beautiful question, and yet very hard to answer.
No, I think, you know, starting out, I was very fortunate to have, you know, I mean, right out of film school, I did Bus 44, and, you know, I won in Venice and Cannes and Sundance and all these big festivals that everybody aspires to go to.
So fame would make you happy?
No, not fame, but the recognition from the industry that, hey, this guy made a good movie. So that was what started my career. Without that, it would have been a longer journey to get to where I am. And then right after that,
recognition made you happy at the very beginning.
I think recognition of, yes, by peers, by people that I respected, by the film industry, people that allowed me to be able to go and make my first feature film. And so when Waiting Alone came, I was able to get, you know, movie stars in it. We made that movie, and reaction to it was good. For me now, though, things have also changed because also I have a kid now. He's 5. You know, so to me, you know, that's what keeps me grounded. That's what makes me happy, is to see him and his growing and his wonderment of everything in the world.
Yes.
That to me, during my darkest times professionally, I'm still happy because I got him.
Well, you talk a lot about the wish. In your movie, and you love that because you would help others who watch the movie be entertained while at the same time thinking just a little bit, even just a little bit, would be already wonderful. What about that for you? Do you dare to think what you wish?
My own? Yeah, well, I think we always have wishes, you know. We have wishes and hopes, you know, and we try to go after our wishes, you know. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But I think whatever tests that come in life, they're just a way to make you grow.
To grow, only naturally.
Yeah.
Terrific.
All right,
what a
thanks.
pleasure to have you.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dayyan Eng, a Chinese director, an American who's been living in China for 20 years and coming up with a lot of interesting words. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, you can visit our website. Just try to find us, World Insight CGTN, in your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again tomorrow for insights across China and around the world. Good night.